100-day, 10 minutes a day taco sticking challenge, day 5. This video is going to be mainly responding to Zoe, I believe. I don't know how to pronounce your name exactly, but she put up a video yesterday on day 4 in the first comment, if you have a good look. And also Simon Van and they sort of brought up some issues, and so this is mainly going to be a recap video, probably speeding up a bit much. So we've talked about, I didn't want to have to explain too much about anatomy, but it looks like this had to be done. So we've talked about single pivots, and then lifting them up and having an exponential with a single pivot, but coming down with the pivot while it's rotating. So single pivot rotating. So I'm just using 2 fingers to demonstrate. 2 fingers. 2 fingers. So we're going into in a little bit more detail what a single pivot is, how you're going to actually do that in your fingers, because looking at some of the videos, it seems I'm not being very clear. So single pivot is when you're doing some 2 points of touching, the least amount of points, and you're just pivoting like that, and then when you lift this up a little bit and you come down, and then that's sort of what I'm calling the exponential curve. And then we're talking about yesterday, day 4, is the height of when this pivots. Oh, sorry, I'll move this so the pivot doesn't do anything. And closer, you can hear the sound difference, and really close, and higher up, and see how that bounces differently. Okay, so right now we're going to talk about what actually is happening when I say one finger, and especially the ring finger is what I'm saying, and pivoting. So if you're looking yesterday, look at the video, what I've seen is sort of this kind of motion. Now, a lot of things are happening there. One, there's opening and dropping, and second, that's not a rotational. So there's a few things to explain. First, if you're talking about a pivot, which is what I'm doing with at least 2 fingers, you're not letting go. I know it looks very loosey and goosey, kind of like what Simon is saying. It's very loose. I'm very loose in the fingers. A little bit is exaggerated-ish, but not really. It is more relaxed to. I'm demonstrating very much what you need and what you don't need, and so I'm saying gun sign. It looks very loose when I'm playing, like all this stuff. I'm not playing like this, but really, you don't really need all the other stuff. So I'm bringing it down to what's essentially happening and proving to you really much by exaggerating a little bit, not too much, that you don't need all these other things. It doesn't mean that I want you to extend it. Okay, so what a pivot is that there is contact constantly, especially when it's having a rotation. So if you put a screw through that and you have a pivot point and this is moving, that's constantly in contact. So when this ring finger is doing that, it's constantly in contact. Okay, so in your hands, these are flexors, like this. So when you press down on this, it flexes inwards. You can try it on yourself and completely relaxed. And then on this side, they sort of, if you pull back a little bit, you can extend. So they're extenders, and these are flexors. Okay, so these muscles pull and they come inwards, and these muscles, when they pull backwards, they extend that bit. Okay, so key thing to realize is that you cannot extend a muscle. You can only contract. So these contractions pull this upwards, and these contractions pull this inwards. Okay, so that's how you get either side. Okay, so when you're dropping like that, what I'm calling dropping, so when you're doing that, that means these are being activated, and you are extending. So I'm not asking you to extend. I'm talking about pivoting, and pivoting is really that one and that one to close something. You're actually using the muscles in there, so you are flexing to close. But obviously, if you're closing all of it, you can't. It's very tight. Okay, so I'm trying to show you just one. Okay, and you know, if that is your thing that you screw through, so if you look very closely, that is where the sort of so-called rubber band, imaginary rubber band is. It's just touching the inside between these two joints is where it's contacting this bit, and then the other bit is actually in the sort of that sort of groove of your hand. Look, again, everyone's hands are different, so that might not apply to you, but the key thing is that is constantly, I guess, flexing or holding it. So the rest is not. The rest is free. And you want to start with not so high that you have to drop it or do anything here. All you want to do is, so maybe start with sort of perpendicular and a pivot. Okay, perpendicular and a pivot, and then all you have to do is lift it up. Which when you lift, there is a lot going on in here. I'm trying not to talk about it, but it's basically there's two bones here going. There's one bone, two bones here in the forearm that when you lift, it turns to go up, and there's a lot of muscles going on in there. So we want to maybe start with that alone, okay, and then lift. That is not turned off. It's just, I'm saying the other hands can not be flexed if you want it, ideally, which gives you a lot of relaxation. Again, it's just a way to teach you what is essential. Okay, so that lift, drop, lift, drop. So these, if you look at any instrument player, I'm a guitarist, any tradition, these two are very strong. Third one is, when you come to the ring finger, these are actually joined by the same tendon. So it's really hard. There's really no playing styles of the world where you separate that. So in guitar, you'll play 1, 2, 3, and then you go 3, 2, 1, or whatever. You rarely use the pinky as a separate thing because these two are joined together. So in taiko, essentially these two are the same thing. So if you're holding with these two and you're finding trouble that you're doing that, one is because you're really pivoting from your ulnar and radius bone. You're doing a turn, a sort of rotation, and these two are being flexed. These two, okay? You don't want that, all right? You just want these two, and if you can, only that. So it's only one thing flexing. So again, start from the bottom, lift. That's a pivot. Okay, that's a pivot. That's what a pivot is. And of course, you can do many things with the pivot post, but that's where all the single pivot comes from, and everything is loose. But you want to start maybe nice and slow. Just lift. You shouldn't use this middle finger. You shouldn't use the index finger. You definitely shouldn't use the thumb. The thumb is the muscles of the thumb is this massive thing here, which, you know, apparently separates us from a dolphin having civilization, which we'll talk about later. We kind of use it in the ultimate form, where you in that, you know, which again, first thing first is just to train how to get a pivot. We'll get that in detail, get that contact point, and again, you're lifting and dropping, lifting and dropping. It's just very hard to lift that from there, so you're kind of using that to lift. Yeah. And then it looks like this from the other side. That's day 1, I think day 2, whatever it is. I think it's day 1. Okay, so don't go start too high, start low, and just don't even worry about hitting it, just make a pivot. Okay, all right, see you tomorrow. I'll explain more of all these things, but yeah, try to get a very clean pivot. Again, ask me any questions. I hope that helps.